Over a decade, Triton has run 303 events across 30 festivals, drawing 37,115 total entries from 2,033 tracked players and awarding almost $1.9 billion in prize money, with roughly $98 million skimmed off in rake. Those figures sound like a celebration of poker's golden age. But once you take a closer look at the numbers, the story it tells is far grimmer than the glossy livestream highlights suggest. For years, the mythology of high roller poker was built on live earnings numbers from sites like the Hendon Mob, where players with tens of millions in cash looked like untouchable winners. The problem is that those numbers never told you how much they spent to win those amounts, how many times they fired re-entries, or how often they bricked entirely. Triton's analytics, built from the MTTDB database, finally combined those headline caches with everyday recorded buy-in, revealing each player's net profit and ROI over a full decade of super high rollers. The first thing the analytics show is that Triton functions as a closed economy where nearly all the money circulates within a narrow group. Over 10 years, roughly 2,000 unique players entered Triton events, but the top 10% of them captured an astonishing 86.4% of all the prize money paid out. When analysts zoomed in on regulars, they found that about 72% are net losers purely on tournament results before counting travel, accommodations, and staking deals. The dream is real for a small minority. For the majority, Triton could be described as an expensive hobby, a marketing vehicle, or a high-variance gamble where the expected value is starkly negative. Traditional all-time money list tells a seductive story. Bryn Kenny has won over $50 million in Triton earnings, Jason Kuhn north of $40 million, Stephen Chidwick and Dan Devoris in the 30s, and a whole parade of names with 8-figure live caches. But the player analytics added 2 new columns that changed everything: net P&L and ROI. When you filter by profit, Triton's real hierarchy shifts. Kenny remains a massive winner, but relatively quieter names like Alex Ponakovs and Dan Smith suddenly compete for the crown of most efficient crusher. On paper, Triton's top winners by net profit look insane. Bryn Kenny sits at roughly $37.3 million in net profit with a 287% ROI, turning 118 entries into 26 caches, 5 titles, and a career-defining runner-up finish in the 2019 Triton Million for charity that alone paid him about $21.5 million. Aaron Zhang, who actually won the same Triton Million, has just 3 career Triton caches, but $18.2 million in profit and a staggering 482% ROI, almost all from that single victory. Further down the list, players like Alejandro Lococo post giant ROIs on tiny sample sizes, riding one huge invitational score into 7-figure profit territory. In these cases, the analytics reveal a key truth. In a high roller environment, one score can dominate an entire decade of results, making variance as important as skill in defining who becomes a legend. Speaking of numbers that don't tell the full story, here's something every online player should know. Think your poker setup is optimized? After rakeback, are you basically at zero or scraping by on a small profit? Most players are leaving money on the table and don't even know it. EV Boost shows you the real number. Just enter your limits, volume, and current rakeback and see your true value gap in minutes. Their professional support team helps you close that gap with access to the softest fields available, private rake and bonuses, technical setup, mindset coaching, and profitable withdrawal deals. Click the link in the description and boost your EV today. Now contrast those winners with Jason Kuhn, Triton's most visible ambassador and arguably the greatest high roller tournament grinder of the era. Kuhn's Triton line shows 365 entries, 81 caches, 12 titles, and about $12.3 million in net profit for a 43% ROI, which is impressive but nowhere near the explosive percentages of single score champions. His graph tells you a different story. Not a single spike, but a long staircase of consistent winnings, a career built on grinding every stop, navigating every format, and winning over and over with a relatively modest edge in incredibly tough fields. Many of Triton's regular winners look similar. Dan Devoris, Mikita Bachikowski, Danny Tank, and others post strong profits and double-digit ROIs, but they do it by relentless participation and steady accumulation rather than one magical payday. If someone is winning tens of millions, someone else is paying for it, and Triton's data makes those names impossible to ignore. Santosh Suvarna has around $11.3 million in Triton earnings, but is down $12.3 million overall with a negative 52% ROI over 315 entries and just one win, essentially acting as a frequent sponsor of the prize pool he rarely recovers from. Nick Petrangelo, widely respected as one of the sharpest tournament minds alive, shows $8.3 million in prize money but a net loss of $9.2 million and the same minus 52% ROI, a jaw-dropping stat line when you realize how good he is away from Triton. Then there is Isaac Caxton, who made 434 entries, the most in Triton history, generating $23.1 million in cashes, 45 final tables, and yet a negative $7.7 million in net P&L and minus 25% ROI. A brutal demonstration that volume and apparent success do not guarantee profit in these games. The shock factor increases when you scan familiar legendary names. Daniel Negreanu shows a Triton line of roughly $700,000 in losses and minus 53% ROI. Eric Seidel is down $2.9 million at minus 58%, and Tom Dwan is down around $800,000 at minus 16%. All negative despite their long-standing reputations as world-class players. Andrew Roble is down $3.2 million with a staggering minus 88% ROI, while commentator and pro Nick Schulman sits roughly $1.8 million underwater at minus 74%. Revealing how misleading prestige and airtime can be when you only see their biggest televised scores. Even Phil Ivey, the greatest of all time, shows about $18.2 million in Triton cashes, 5 titles, and essentially a break-even at plus 1% ROI over the decade, which is extraordinary only when you recall he's playing against the toughest fields in the world. The founders themselves aren't printing money either. Paul Fua has around $26.2 million in earnings, but just $450,000 in net profit for a wafer-thin 2% ROI, while co-founder Richard Yong is significantly in the red, underscoring that running the series is far more reliably profitable than playing in it. Triton's biggest losers list mixes businessmen and world-class pros, making it obvious that in a field this small and this strong, even elite skill cannot fully outrun the house edge of variance and rake. The publication of these analytics has triggered a fierce debate across the poker world. Players like Mike Matusow have called the high roller scene a mirage, arguing that huge headline payouts disguises net losses and that many supposed stars are either in debt or heavily reliant on backing arrangements. Others are uneasy about the ethics of exposing detailed financial results, pointing out that players often sell action and take pieces of one another, meaning the public tournament P&L may differ from their private financial reality. Triton's data team acknowledges some of these caveats, noting that pre-2020 re-entry records can be incomplete and that their analysis captures official entries and payouts, not off-table deals, but insists that publishing net profit and ROI is still far more honest than the traditional practice of only displaying lifetime cashes. Regardless of where you stand, the effect is undeniable. Myths are being dismantled, reputations are being recalibrated, and aspiring high roller pros now have a brutally clear picture of what they're stepping into. For anyone dreaming of playing Triton, these analytics should function as both warning and guide. Firstly, they show that in a decade-long sample, roughly 3/4 of regular Triton players lost money on the series, even though many of them have impressive global tournament careers elsewhere, which means that simply being good at poker is not enough in these hyper-competitive environments. Secondly, they highlight that title and money list positions do not guarantee long-term profitability. Thirdly, they remind you that the biggest fortunes often hinge on one or two extraordinary scores where luck, timing, and field composition can override years of grinding in determining who ends up with the biggest positive P&L. And they raise an uncomfortable but necessary question. In an age of perfect data, can the romance of high roller lifestyle survive the cold numbers, or will the brutal math finally change how we define greatness at the top of the poker world?